Hi, Shona. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. As
Morning.
you know, we asked you about some of the practical things that people can put into place if they have a hearing loss. That's more than some of the things that audiologists maybe talk to the patients about, like facing somebody, speaking slower, that kind of thing. So the idea of today is that we just get a bit more of an insight into some of the tips and the tricks that you can put in place, if that's okay.
That's okay. Although all those things you've mentioned are kind of at the top of my list, if I'm honest, they're very useful.
Okay, so let's start first of all with understanding a bit about you and a bit about your hearing loss journey, just for people who don't know you.
Okay. So I've had a hearing loss since I was a child and um, have had hearing aids most of my life. And I have a high frequency hearing loss, which obviously affects being able to hear speech quite a bit. So I have brought along a very old picture of my audiogram, and it, it I got that mainly because I think it makes the point that it's quite hard sometimes, and I know this happens to other people, and it's probably a postcode thing, to actually get the information that helps you to understand your hearing loss. And therefore, if somebody isn't telling you how to make things better for yourself, um, you're just left to find out by trial and error. So most of my learning actually has come quite late in life, which I think is quite amazing. Seeing that I've seen both private and NHS over the years, nearly all of my life. So it's only really into my late 40s that I actually found information that says this might help you to hear better. So I think my point there, and I know things have changed, and it's a very personal experience, is that people will tell you about the hearing aid, and you have maybe a misconception at times that the hearing aid will solve everything, but there isn't always a lot of time or people who will tell you actually how it affects communication, how it affects speech, why it might be so hard for you. And it will vary from individual to individual, but I'm a person that quite likes to analyse things. And I think if I'd had an audiogram, if somebody had told me about the speech banana, and also maybe told me about some of the things that would help, then I think my life would have been a lot easier. So a big part of communication for me, especially when somebody is trying to transfer information to me, is that although I think I've heard it and I'm actively listening, when I've come out of that session, I've completely forgotten everything they said. So part of my communication techniques are when it's really something that's going to be useful to me and information I need, I really do need to write it down almost as somebody is telling me that. Generally, the thing that stayed with me that helped me understand how to hear a little bit better with communication, with speech, is I have a visual picture that whatever I do, I've got to reduce the distance between me and wherever the sound is coming from. And to see that my hearing aids are just a microphone, and if I can get my hearing aid nearer to where that sound is coming from, then that's going to help me a lot. And it does all those automatic things of getting you to face the person, getting you to be closer, getting you to reduce the noise around you. So I found that quite a useful tip, to just see the hearing aid is nothing more than a microphone, simplify it down quite a bit, and I've just got to get as close as I can to that sound. And if I can't get close, then I need help with something else that's going to get me closer. I don't think I'm alone in this. Most people with a hearing loss don't want to be a bother. They don't want to be distant. So they don't really always want to draw attention to the fact that they didn't really hear what you just said. And they hope that they'll catch up in the next sentence. So a lot of what helps me is understanding the context. And we've got this lip reading. That you can lip read really well if you can work out what the context might be. And we had a great lip reading session to explain that when our teacher, who doesn't use her voice, we have to lip read, just set us off by saying, I'm going to be in the kitchen. And she started to say some word, and as soon as people knew she was in the kitchen, they could try to work where she's going to be talking about food or cooking. And the success of being able to lip read then was so much higher than if she hadn't mentioned the room. We wouldn't have had a clue, I don't think. Otherwise, for me is if I'm not sure what someone said, and I'm not very good at it, but it's then, if I've got what I think is the gist of it, is then to ask a closed question. But that's easier said than done. You're not always very good at that. And people don't always answer the way you expect, yes and no answer. But people very rarely say yes or no to a closed question, I find. They tend to say yes or no and add a bit on, so you still can be quite confused.
So how easy or how difficult is it for you to get somebody to say something again? You talked about the fact that, sometimes it's easier just to pretend that you've heard or hope that you've picked stuff up. So how easy is it for you to just nudge somebody and get some further information from them?
It's not that difficult. It depends on the environment, obviously. So I think we all do a mental assessment of before you ask somebody to repeat really quickly. You think, how much chance am I going to hear them better this time? Because there is always some people that you, whether it's the pitch of their voice, that's just one that you can't hear, or you're in a noisy environment, you're in a group or something. I think quite a lot of people let it go. I think most people, even people who've got good hearing, will let it go. And you think, how much is this worth to me before I ask somebody to repeat? I don't hear it the second time. I mean, I have used things like, can you rephrase that? Or I think you said, and that helps. And I think on a one-to-one, generally now, I don't really have a great deal of problem getting somebody to repeat. I think it's mainly in when there's a couple of people and the conversation is going a bit quicker, then it's quite easy not to bother and to just let it go and withdraw. And then that's when that's where my struggles, and I'm sure most guys, that you do give up, and then you get all that emotion around it, and then it becomes a little bit more difficult to get involved in the conversation.
Really like the visual image that you talked about of that, if I'm trying to hear this thing, I have to get closer in one way or another.
Yeah.
If you were talking to somebody who had a recent hearing loss, what would you say are the kind of key tips and tricks that they should employ?
To get that person to face you and to get close to them. And it doesn't mean you need to be nose to nose, but just they're in your space and a comfortable space for both of you. So they need to face you. You need to be closer to them. And as much as you can, you need to be away from other noises. And if that means turning things off or going to another room, just asking them to pause for a second. That's what you need to do. Living with somebody is a really, really difficult thing for the other person as well to remember. They've got to be in the same room as you. It is a partnership communication, and it takes a lot of relearning for both people, if you've been used to communicating and being able to hear from other rooms. I've never known what that's like really, but I think it's quite a gradual process. The glorious thing hearing aids, I wouldn't be without mine, but it is just going to amplify something, and you've got to help it as much as it's going to help you hear. Really, until I was in my late 40s, that I joined a lip reading club, and I also went on a self-management course with Hearing Link, and suddenly I'm with other people just like me, and you learn so much from them, and some of it will work for you and some of it won't. And one of the most important things that I learned is that it's very tiring doing this work of hearing and communicating, so you need to be kind to yourself and not expect too much, really.
One of the most challenging situations for people with hearing loss is if you're somewhere where there's background noise.
Yeah.
What additional things would you do if you were in a noisy environment?
If you can't get away from the noise, and I'm thinking of a meeting situation less than a one-to-one, making sure that that only one person is speaking at a time, making sure again that that person is facing you, getting your attention before they speak, in a sense. So they might say your name and just give you a moment for you to focus on that before launching into whatever it might be they want to ask you or tell you.
Have you, so I've had some patients before who've talked about things like that when they've gone into the dining room for the first time after a new hearing aid, that the echo from having no tablecloth on has made a big difference, but then when they've gone in the living room and all their soft furnishings, it's changed the acoustics. Do you notice the difference in different rooms like that?
I don't generally. It's not been something that's been a big thing for me, but I do notice it when I am going out for a meal. It is one of the things that people talk about at lip readings. I think it must be very helpful. It's just not something that I really pick up on.
And then obviously there's a bit of a spectrum of how people cope with hearing loss, from the fact that people are unassertive and withdraw and become isolated, to being aggressive, and then obviously being ideally placed at being assertive. So yeah. What kind of tips, what kind of instructions can we as a profession do to help people either move from one end of the spectrum to more of the centre?
I've always been very open about my hearing loss, and so I'd go back to another work situation. So I'm meeting a load of people I don't know, and it's going to be at a conference, and you just sit down on a table, and there's going to be maybe half a dozen people around the table, and you're going to end up working on something in that conference. And I would go along thinking, I've done everything. I've got a badge, I've got hearing loss, I've got a little card I can put on the table that mentions, that there's a hearing problem. I've got something. And I'd introduce myself as saying, oh, I'm Shona, but I don't hear very well. So I might not hear everything you say. I might not be much good in the group scenario. And I used to leave it at that. And then the conference would start off, and nobody did anything different, and I'd sit there thinking, well, I told you I can't hear. Can't you see I'm being left out? And then somebody'd ask me a question, I have no idea what they're saying, and I used to get perhaps not aggressive, but quite emotional and frustrated and withdrawn. And it took me a long time to realise that I was giving people more credit than I should have. They just didn't know what to do. I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't have my problem, and I wasn't telling them what I needed. So I think unless you're in a position to be able to help people, in a sense, by telling them what you need, it's very easy for it to descend into aggression. You do need to have to sit back and think, I am going to go into a difficult listening situation most of the time. What are the two things, or even the one thing I'm going to tell somebody that will actually make a difference, make them go, all right, I've got to face that person. And people will do it if they know, but you've got to lead them to it.